Jasmine Taylor stands frozen at the airplane entrance, gold ticket in hand, tears streaming down her face as Captain Richard Wilson's mocking laughter echoes through the first-class cabin. Little does he know, this 15-year-old prodigy will soon own the very airline that just humiliated her. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of story lovers. Now, let's discover how a talented young girl turned humiliation into triumph. Jasmine Taylor had always been exceptional. At 15, her bedroom walls in South Chicago weren't decorated with pop stars or movie posters, but with aerospace diagrams, equations, and pictures of Katherine Johnson and Mae Jemison. While other kids her age spent weekends at the mall, Jasmine buried herself in advanced physics textbooks at the local library. Dreaming of a future among the stars, life hadn't been easy for the Taylors. Vanessa Taylor, Jasmine's mother, worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads after Jasmine's father abandoned them when she was just 4 years old. Their apartment in South Chicago wasn't in the best neighborhood, but Vanessa had created a sanctuary where Jasmine's brilliance could flourish. Despite their limited resources, "You're going to change the world someday," Vanessa would tell her daughter each night before bed. "Don't let anyone tell you what you can't do because of where you're from or what you look like." Jasmine took those words to heart. Despite attending an underfunded public school with outdated textbooks and overcrowded classrooms, she maintained perfect grades. Her science teacher, Mrs. Bennett, often stayed late to give Jasmine access to the lab equipment and mentorship she craved. "This girl is going to build the next generation of spacecraft," Mrs. Bennett told her colleagues. "If we can just help her get her foot in the door." That door opened unexpectedly when Mrs. Bennett showed Jasmine a national competition announcement: Future Aviation Leaders of America. The grand prize? A gold-embossed ticket for a first-class flight to Washington, D.C., a VIP tour of NASA facilities, and the chance to present your aviation innovation to aerospace executives and engineers. "You have to enter, Jasmine," Mrs. Bennett insisted, pushing the application across her desk. "Your fuel efficiency design could win this." Jasmine stared at the glossy brochure with images of sleek aircraft, NASA's headquarters, and previous winners standing proudly in front of rockets. She had never seen anyone who looked like her in those photos. "Those kids probably all come from fancy private schools with real labs," Jasmine said doubtfully. "They probably have parents who are engineers and scientists, and none of them have your brain," Mrs. Bennett countered. "Your disadvantages have made you more resourceful, more determined. That's your edge." For weeks, Jasmine worked tirelessly on her project. She developed a theoretical model for a new aircraft fuel system that could potentially increase efficiency by 23% while reducing carbon emissions. Using the school's ancient computer lab, after hours, she created detailed technical drawings and ran countless simulations to perfect her design. When the application deadline arrived, Jasmine submitted her work with trembling hands and then tried to forget about it. The chances of winning seemed so remote that she didn't want to build up hope, only to face disappointment. 6 weeks later, Mrs. Bennett burst into Jasmine's calculus class, waving an envelope with a gold seal. The entire room fell silent as Jasmine opened it with shaking hands. "Dear Ms. Taylor," she read aloud, her voice barely a whisper, "we are pleased to inform you that your innovative fuel efficiency design has been selected as the grand prize winner of this year's Future Aviation Leaders of America competition." The classroom erupted in cheers. For once, Jasmine wasn't seen as the awkward math genius, but as someone who had brought pride to their struggling school. That evening, when Jasmine showed the letter to her mother, Vanessa pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, tears streaming down her face. "Your father said we wouldn't amount to anything," Vanessa whispered. "But look at you now." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. The flight was scheduled for the following month, giving Jasmine time to refine her presentation for the NASA engineers. The competition would cover all travel expenses, but there were still other needs. Jasmine had never owned formal clothes suitable for presenting to executives. When word spread through their tight-knit community about Jasmine's achievement, neighbors stepped up. Mrs. Washington from apartment for B, who worked at a department store, brought home a professional blazer and skirt set. Mr. Rodrigo from the first floor, whose daughter had recently graduated college, donated a barely used laptop bag. The local barber shop took up a collection to buy Jasmine a new suitcase. South, Chicago's finest, read the card they presented with the gift. Show those NASA folks what our community produces. The night before her departure, Jasmine couldn't sleep. She stood at her bedroom window, looking up at the narrow slice of sky visible between the apartment buildings. Somewhere up there were satellites, the International Space Station, and the vast universe that had captivated her imagination since childhood. I belong there too, she whispered to herself, clutching her gold ticket. And tomorrow is the first step. Dawn broke with Vanessa already in the kitchen, preparing Jasmine's favorite breakfast despite having worked a night shift at the hospital. Eat up, she urged, sliding a plate of French toast across the table. You need your strength today. Jasmine tried to swallow past the lump of anxiety in her throat. What if they realize I don't belong there, Mom? What if they can tell we're poor? Vanessa knelt beside her daughter's chair, taking Jasmine's hands in hers. Listen to me. That gold ticket, you earned it with this. She tapped Jasmine's forehead. And this. She placed her hand over Jasmine's heart. Your brilliance and your determination. Nobody can take that from you. 3 hours later, Jasmine stood in the vast, gleaming expanse of O'Hare International Airport, clutching her gold-embossed ticket, her mother's words echoing in her mind as she gathered her courage to step into a world she'd only dreamed about. O'Hare International Airport sprawled before Jasmine like an alien landscape. The polished floors reflected fluorescent lights that made everything look too bright, too clean, too different from the world she knew. Business people inexpensive. Suits brushed past her, their rolling suitcases worth more than everything she owned. Jasmine clutched her second-hand suitcase tighter, feeling the weight of her gold ticket in her jacket pocket. Finding her way to the check-in counter took longer than expected. She'd never flown before, had never even been inside an airport. The departures board flashed with destinations she'd only read about in books: Paris, Tokyo, London. Would she visit those places someday too? At the premium check-in desk, the airline representative did a double take when Jasmine presented her gold ticket. This is the first-class check-in, the woman said slowly, as if Jasmine might not understand English. Economy check-in is over there. She pointed toward a line snaking around stanchions. I know, Jasmine replied, pushing the gold ticket forward. This is my ticket. I won a competition. The woman examined the ticket with obvious skepticism before reluctantly processing it. Do you have ID? Jasmine handed over her school ID, the only photo identification she possessed. We typically require government-issued identification, the woman said with a frown. The competition organizers said this would be sufficient since I'm a minor, Jasmine explained, showing the accompanying letter from future aviation leaders of America. After several minutes of the representative making phone calls to verify, Jasmine finally received her boarding pass. Gate 22, the woman said curtly. Security is that way. Security presented another hurdle as Jasmine placed her items in the plastic bin. A TSA agent approached. First class? He asked, eyeing her worn sneakers and the patched elbow of her jacket. Yes, Jasmine answered, straightening her shoulders. I won a competition, right? The agent said doubtfully. I'll need to see your boarding pass again. After a more thorough than usual screening, including a pat-down that other passengers didn't seem to receive, Jasmine was finally allowed through. She hastily gathered her belongings, aware of impatient sighs from travelers behind her. With an hour before boarding, Jasmine found her gate and sat near the first-class boarding area, careful to stay out of anyone's way. She reviewed her presentation on her borrowed laptop, mouthing the words silently to herself. Excuse me, is that seat taken? Jasmine looked up to see an older Asian woman gesturing to the seat beside her. No. Go ahead, Jasmine replied, scooting her backpack closer. Thank you. I'm Melissa Chen, by the way. I'll be one of your flight attendants today. Jasmine's tension eased slightly. "I'm Jasmine Taylor. This is my first time flying." Melissa smiled warmly. "First class is a nice way to start. Business or pleasure?" "I won a competition," Jasmine explained, showing her gold ticket. "I'm presenting my aerospace engineering project at NASA tomorrow." "That's impressive," Melissa said, genuine admiration in her voice. "Well, I'll make sure you have a comfortable flight." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the flight crew. Four pilots in crisp uniforms strode through the terminal, commanding respect with their mere presence. Leading them was a tall man with silver hair and a posture that screamed authority. The captain's stripes on his uniform gleamed under the terminal lights. "That's Captain Richard Wilson," Melissa whispered to Jasmine. "He's been with the airline for 30 years, third-generation pilot." Jasmine watched Captain Wilson stop to chat with the gate agents, his booming laugh carrying across the waiting area. He exuded confidence that came from a lifetime of privilege and respect. As boarding time approached, Jasmine gathered her things and moved closer to the priority boarding lane. She noticed Captain Wilson watching her, his eyes narrowing slightly. "First-class boarding will begin momentarily," announced the gate agent. "We invite our premium passengers and those needing special assistance to approach the gate at this time." Jasmine stepped forward, boarding pass and gold ticket in hand. Before the gate agent could scan her pass, Captain Wilson intercepted. "Excuse me, young lady," he said, his voice carrying enough for nearby passengers to hear. "I believe first class is boarding now. You might want to wait for your section." Jasmine felt heat rising to her cheeks. "I am in first class, sir," she said, extending her boarding pass. "I won a competition." Wilson took the boarding pass, examining it with exaggerated scrutiny. His eyebrows rose as he looked between the document and Jasmine's face. "Future aviation, leader's gold ticket winner?" he asked, his tone making it clear he found this hard to believe. "You?" "Yes, sir," Jasmine replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I designed a new fuel efficiency system." Captain Wilson chuckled, the sound condescending rather than warm. "Well, these diversity programs certainly are getting creative." He handed the boarding pass to the gate agent. "Make sure this is authentic, will you? We wouldn't want anyone in the wrong place." The gate agent scanned Jasmine's pass, confirming its validity. "She's confirmed into A, Captain Wilson. Is she now?" Wilson said, still blocking Jasmine's path to the jet bridge. "And how exactly does a young person from," he glanced at her boarding pass again, "South Chicago end up with a first-class ticket and a supposed invitation to NASA?" People were staring now. Whispers rippled through the boarding area. Jasmine felt as if she were shrinking, becoming smaller with each passing second. "I won the National Future Aviation Leaders Competition," she repeated, her voice barely audible now. "My design was selected from thousands of entries." "Of course it was," Wilson said with a smirk. "I'm sure it had nothing to do with certain quotas that need filling." He turned to the other pilots behind him. "Remember when these competitions were about merit?" Melissa Chen stepped forward, her professional smile strained. "Captain Wilson, we need to complete boarding to stay on schedule." Wilson gave Jasmine one last dismissive look. "Well, I suppose rules are rules, even when they're bent for social engineering experiments." He gestured grandly toward the jet bridge. "Enjoy your first flight in first class. I doubt it will be a common occurrence in your future." As Jasmine walked past him, the sound of his mocking laughter followed her down the jet bridge. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not now. On board." A different flight attendant directed her to seat 2A, by the window. The first-class cabin was a world apart from anything Jasmine had experienced. Wide leather seats, personal entertainment screens, fresh flowers in small vases. As other first-class passengers boarded, their reactions to finding Jasmine in their exclusive cabin ranged from surprise to disapproval. No one sat beside her. Though the flight was full, it was as if she carried a contagion no one wanted to catch. From the cockpit doorway, Captain Wilson watched the cabin fill, his eyes occasionally drifting to Jasmine with undisguised disdain. When he finally turned away to prepare for departure, Jasmine let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The gold ticket that had represented her dreams now felt like a scarlet letter marking her as an imposter. As the aircraft doors closed, Jasmine wondered if she had made a terrible mistake in believing she could ever belong in this world. The sleek aircraft lifted off the runway, pressing Jasmine back into her plush leather seat as Chicago's skyline diminished below them. Under different circumstances, the 15-year-old might have been thrilled by her first flight experience, especially in the luxury of first class. Instead, the cabin felt like an elegant prison where she was serving a sentence for the crime of aspiration. Have you ever been made to feel like you don't belong somewhere? Comment number 1 if you've experienced discrimination in a place where you had every right to be. Make sure to like and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming prejudice. I wonder, what would you have done in Jasmine's position? Would you have stood up for yourself or stayed quiet to avoid more confrontation? Flight attendants moved efficiently through the cabin, offering hot towels and pre-departure beverages to the passengers, or rather, to most passengers. They seemed to develop convenient blind spots whenever passing Jasmine's seat. When she politely raised her hand to request water, the flight attendant nodded, but never returned. Only Melissa Chen, the attendant she'd met at the gate, showed her any kindness, discreetly placing a bottle of water and a warm cookie on her tray table during a quiet moment. "Hang in there," Melissa whispered before continuing her duties. Jasmine sipped her water slowly, trying to become invisible. She opened her laptop, focusing on her presentation to distract herself from the uncomfortable reality around her. The screen displayed complex diagrams of her fuel efficiency system, a design that had beaten thousands of others from students with far more advantages than she had ever known. "That's quite impressive for someone your age." The voice startled Jasmine. She looked up to find a woman in her early 40s with deep brown skin and a tailored business suit standing in the aisle beside her seat. The empty seat next to Jasmine had remained conspicuously vacant, even as the rest of first class filled up. "Do you mind if I sit here?" the woman asked. "I was assigned to 4C, but I prefer the window view for work." "Of course," Jasmine replied, quickly gathering her things to make room. The woman settled into the adjacent seat and extended her hand. "Dr. Eleanor Hayes." "Jasmine Taylor," she responded, shaking the woman's hand with the firm grip her mother had taught her. "So, Jasmine Taylor," Dr. Hayes said, nodding toward the laptop screen. "Want to tell me about this innovative fuel system you've designed?" Jasmine hesitated, wary after her earlier reception. "How did you know it was my design?" Dr. Hayes smiled. "I overheard at the gate. Plus, I recognized the Future Aviation Leaders Gold Ticket program. I was one of the judges last year." Jasmine's eyes widened. "You were a judge, are you with NASA, Aerotech Industries actually?" "I'm the Chief Innovation Officer, heading to DC for some meetings at the Department of Transportation." Dr. Hayes leaned closer to examine the screen. "Your approach to the fuel injection sequence is fascinating. You've incorporated principles that most undergraduate engineering students wouldn't even consider." For the first time since boarding, Jasmine felt a spark of confidence return. "I studied the thermodynamic inefficiencies in current systems and realized there was potential for significant improvement by recalibrating the fuel-air mixture at various altitudes." Dr. Hayes nodded appreciatively. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need more of in the industry. Fresh perspectives, questioning established methods." As they continued discussing aeronautical concepts, Jasmine gradually relaxed. Dr. Hayes treated her as an intellectual equal, asking challenging questions and offering insights from her years in the field. "You know," Dr. Hayes said after a particularly detailed exchange about thrust ratios, "you remind me of myself at your age. Except you're probably smarter than I was." "I doubt that," Jasmine replied, but she couldn't help smiling. "It's true. I was 18 before I understood the principles you're working with now." Dr. Hayes paused, her expression growing more serious. "It wasn't easy being a black woman in aerospace engineering 20 years ago. Still isn't, to be honest, but it's worth it." Jasmine thought about the gold ticket competition that had brought her here. "Did you have mentors who helped you?" "A few. Not enough. That's why I make a point of supporting young talents like yourself whenever I can." Dr. Hayes took a business card from her wallet and handed it to Jasmine. "Whatever happens with your NASA presentation, I'd like to keep in touch." Jasmine accepted the card reverently, as if it were a talisman. "Thank you, Dr. Hayes." Their conversation was interrupted by the captain's voice over the intercom. "This is Captain Wilson. We're cruising at 37,000 feet with clear skies ahead. Flight time to Washington, D.C. will be approximately 1 hour and 45 minutes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the service." Even through the speaker, Jasmine could detect the smug confidence in his voice. She glanced toward the cockpit, remembering the humiliation at boarding. "Don't let people like him discourage you," Dr. Hayes said quietly, following Jasmine's gaze. "Aviation is still an old boys' club in many ways, but the industry is changing. People like you are the future." Jasmine nodded, though doubt still lingered. "My science project that won the competition, it's not just theoretical. I actually built a small working model with parts from discarded electronics and equipment from our school lab. Really, that's extraordinary. My teacher, Mrs. Bennett, helped me access the equipment after hours." Jasmine scrolled through her presentation to show photos of her prototype. "It's not pretty, but the test results were consistent with my calculations." Dr. Hayes studied the images with growing interest. "Jasmine, this is more than a student project. This is potentially patentable technology." Before Jasmine could respond, the aircraft shuddered. The seatbelt sign chimed on immediately. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." Wilson's voice came through the speakers, tension evident despite his professional tone. "We're experiencing some turbulence. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." The plane shook again, more violently this time. Drinks spilled and overhead bins rattled. Jasmine gripped her armrests, fear replacing her momentary confidence. Dr. Hayes remained calm. "Standard turbulence, nothing to worry about." But as minutes passed, the turbulence didn't subside. Instead, a new sound emerged, a high-pitched whine from somewhere beneath them, followed by a series of mechanical clicks. Melissa Chen appeared in the aisle, her professional composure slipping slightly as she checked that all passengers were secure. When she passed Jasmine's row, her eyes betrayed concern. "Is everything okay?" Dr. Hayes asked quietly. "Just a small technical issue," Melissa replied, her forced smile not reaching her eyes. "Captain Wilson is handling it." As Melissa moved on, Dr. Hayes turned to Jasmine. "What do you think that sound is?" Jasmine listened carefully, her mind racing through possibilities. The pitch of the whine, the pattern of the clicks, the slight vibration through the floor. These details formed a puzzle her engineering mind couldn't resist. "It sounds like a fuel pressure irregularity," she said slowly, "possibly affecting the left engine. The clicks might be the automated system, trying to compensate by adjusting the fuel flow." Dr. Hayes looked impressed. "That's a very specific diagnosis. I've studied aircraft systems extensively," Jasmine explained. "That sound matches what happens when there's cavitation in the fuel delivery system." As if confirming her assessment, the plane suddenly banked to the right, the left, engine's noise changing pitch again. Gasps and nervous murmurs spread through the cabin. The cockpit door opened, and the co-pilot emerged, speaking urgently with the senior flight attendant. Their expressions did nothing to calm the growing anxiety among passengers. They're concerned. Jasmine observed, "If it is cavitation, it could worsen quickly. The pressure fluctuations could damage the engine." Dr. Hayes studied Jasmine's face. "You really understand this, don't you?" Jasmine nodded, her mind racing through potential solutions. "There's a bypass procedure that could stabilize the system until landing, but it's not in the standard emergency protocols because it's relatively new research." The aircraft lurched again. From their first-class seats near the cockpit, they could hear raised voices from the flight deck, stress evident in the rapid exchanges. Dr. Hayes leaned closer. "Jasmine, if you know something that could help, you should speak up." Jasmine shook her head, remembering Captain Wilson's mockery. "He wouldn't listen to me. He made it clear what he thinks of me." "This isn't about him or his prejudices," Dr. Hayes said firmly. "This is about everyone on this plane, including us." Another violent shudder ran through the aircraft. The oxygen masks dropped from overhead compartments, dangling like macabre puppets above terrified passengers. In that moment, Jasmine realized Dr. Hayes was right. This wasn't about her wounded pride or Wilson's discrimination. Lives could be at stake. Taking a deep breath, she unbuckled her seatbelt. The aircraft pitched sharply as Jasmine stood, nearly sending her tumbling back into her seat. She grabbed the headrest to steady herself, the oxygen mask swinging wildly above her. Throughout the cabin, passengers clutched their armrests, white-knuckled and wide-eyed. A baby wailed from somewhere in the main cabin, its cries piercing through the mechanical groans of the struggling aircraft. "Jasmine, be careful," Dr. Hayes cautioned, reaching for the girl's arm. "I have to try," Jasmine replied, determination overtaking her fear. She made her way toward the cockpit, bracing herself against seats as the plane continued to shudder. Melissa Chen intercepted her halfway down the aisle, her professional calm now replaced with visible stress. "You need to return to your seat." Immediately, Melissa insisted, placing a firm hand on Jasmine's shoulder. "It's not safe to be up. I know what's happening with the engines," Jasmine explained urgently. "I might be able to help." Melissa hesitated, conflict evident in her expression. "The captain is handling the situation. Please," Jasmine pressed. "I understand the fuel cavitation issue. It's exactly what my research addresses." Before Melissa could respond, the senior flight attendant approached, her face tight with controlled panic. "Chen, we need all hands to prepare the cabin. Captain's orders. We may need to attempt an emergency landing." The words emergency landing rippled through the cabin, escalating the already tense atmosphere into near hysteria. A businessman in an expensive suit began hyperventilating. An elderly woman clutched her crucifix, lips moving in silent prayer. "Tell the captain there's a passenger who might have relevant technical knowledge," Dr. Hayes called out, her authoritative tone cutting through the chaos. "The future aviation leader's gold ticket winner." The senior attendant looked doubtful, but nodded to Melissa. "Check with the cockpit. We need every advantage right now." Melissa disappeared through the cockpit door, while the senior attendant tried to calm the increasingly panicked passengers. Jasmine stood in the aisle, swaying with each violent movement of the aircraft, questioning whether she had made a terrible mistake. What if her assessment was wrong? What if Wilson humiliated her again? This time in front of the entire plane, the cockpit door opened and Melissa emerged, gesturing for Jasmine to approach. "The captain says you have 30 seconds, she whispered. "He's not happy about this." Jasmine swallowed hard and moved toward the cockpit entrance. As she stepped through the doorway, the technical complexity of the flight deck momentarily overwhelmed her. Dozens of gauges, switches, and digital displays covered every surface, many flashing with warning indicators. Captain Wilson sat in the left seat, his experienced hands moving rapidly across the controls. The co-pilot, a younger man with sweat beading on his forehead, occupied the right seat. Both men glanced up as she entered, Wilson's face darkening with recognition. "This better be important," he snapped. "We're dealing with a serious situation here." Jasmine took a deep breath. "Sir, I believe you're experiencing fuel system cavitation in the left engine. The pressure fluctuations are causing air bubbles in the fuel line, which is why the engine performance is unstable." Wilson's eyes narrowed. "And you determined this?" "How exactly? A semester of high school physics, no, sir," Jasmine replied, standing her ground despite her racing heart. "I've been researching aerospace engineering independently for years. The sound pattern and performance degradation are consistent with cavitation. Standard procedures won't resolve it." The co-pilot looked at her with surprise. "She's right about the symptoms, Captain, and the standard procedures aren't working." Wilson's jaw tightened. "Young lady, this isn't a science fair. These are complex aircraft systems that take years to master. Now please return to your seat and let us do our jobs." The plane lurched violently again, and warning alarms intensified. The left engine indicators flashed red on the digital display. "Sir," Jasmine persisted, grabbing a handhold to stay upright. "There's a bypass procedure that could stabilize the system. It involves reconfiguring the fuel flow to create a more consistent pressure gradient." "Enough," Wilson barked. "Chen, get her out of here now." Captain Wilson, the co-pilot, interjected. Maybe we should hear her out. The situation is deteriorating, and dispatch isn't offering any new solutions. Wilson's face flushed with anger, but another series of alarms cut off his response. The engine display showed worsening parameters, left engine failure imminent. An automated voice announced coolly through the cockpit speakers, 30 seconds. Wilson grudgingly conceded. Explain your bypass procedure. Jasmine stepped forward, pointing to the fuel management system display. You need to override the automated pressure regulation and manually establish a new flow pattern. She quickly outlined the technical steps, her finger tracing paths across the screen. That's not in any procedure manual I've ever seen, Wilson objected. Because it's based on recent research, Jasmine explained. It's precisely what my gold ticket competition entry addressed, a new approach to fuel system stability. During pressure anomalies, the co-pilot looked at Wilson. Captain, we're running out of options. The left engine is going to fail if we don't try something. Wilson's hands tightened on the control yoke, his knuckles white with tension. Pride and professional judgment warred on his face as the aircraft continued to deteriorate around them. If you're wrong, he finally said to Jasmine, you could cause both engines to fail. If I'm right, she countered. You saved the aircraft and everyone on board. Another violent shudder ran through the plane, and more warning lights illuminated across the panel. Show me exactly what you're proposing, Wilson demanded, his voice tight. Jasmine leaned between the pilots, pointing out specific controls. First, you need to disable the automatic fuel regulation system here. Then manually adjust these 3 parameters. The co-pilot nodded, following her logic. It could work, Captain. The theory is sound. Wilson hesitated one final moment, then made his decision. Johnson, take the controls. I'll implement these changes. He turned to Jasmine with a hard stare. If this doesn't work, it's on your head. I understand, sir, Jasmine replied, her voice steadier than she felt inside. Wilson's experienced. Hands moved across the controls, following Jasmine's instructions step by step. The cockpit fell silent except for the continued alarms and the sound of switches being toggled. The co-pilot maintained control of the aircraft, fighting the increasingly erratic movements. Fuel pressure reconfiguration complete, Wilson announced after completing the sequence. Now we wait. Seconds stretched into an eternity as they all stared at the engine displays, looking for any sign of improvement. The warning alarms continued, their urgent chorus. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, the left engine parameters began to stabilize. The violent shaking gradually subsided to a more manageable vibration. The cacophony of alarms reduced to a single persistent tone. Left engine stabilizing, the co-pilot reported, disbelief evident in his voice. Pressure readings normalizing. Wilson checked and rechecked the instruments, his expression a complex mixture of relief and discomfort. The bypass is holding, he acknowledged reluctantly. Engine performance is improving. The automated voice that had previously announced imminent failure now stated, left engine parameters within acceptable limits. The co-pilot turned to Jasmine with undisguised admiration. That was incredible. How did you know this would work? Before Jasmine could answer, Wilson cut in. We still have an emergency situation. We need to divert to the nearest suitable airport. He pointedly avoided looking at Jasmine. Return to your seat now, please. Jasmine nodded, understanding that Wilson's pride wouldn't allow him to acknowledge her contribution more directly. As she turned to leave, the co-pilot gave her a discreet thumbs up. When she re-entered the main cabin, Dr. Hayes was waiting anxiously near the cockpit door. What happened? She whispered as they made their way back to their seats. The bypass procedure is working, Jasmine replied quietly. The engine is stabilizing. As if to confirm her words, Captain Wilson's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've addressed the technical issue with our left engine. As a precautionary measure, we will be making an unscheduled landing at Dulles International Airport in Washington, D.C., which is actually our intended destination. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. The situation is under control. Relieved sighs and nervous laughter rippled through the cabin. Several passengers applauded, Dr. Hayes squeezed Jasmine's hand as they settled back into their seats. "You just potentially saved this plane," she whispered, "and Wilson can't even acknowledge it." Jasmine shrugged, a small smile playing at her lips. "The important thing is that everyone's safe." "True," Dr. Hayes agreed. "But justice matters too, and this isn't over yet." Looking out the window as the aircraft began its descent toward Washington, D.C., Jasmine could see emergency vehicles already positioned along the runway, their lights flashing against the afternoon sun. She wondered what would happen when they landed, and whether Captain Wilson would ever admit that the gold ticket winner he had mocked had just saved his aircraft. The aircraft descended toward Dulles International Airport with emergency vehicles lining the runway, like a welcoming committee no one had wanted. In the cockpit, Captain Wilson worked through the landing checklist with mechanical precision, his face a mask of professional focus that betrayed none of the turmoil beneath. The left engine, while stabilized, still required careful monitoring. "Tower has cleared us for priority landing on runway 1 right," the co-pilot reported. "Emergency services standing by." Wilson nodded curtly, his hands steady on the controls. Despite the residual vibrations running through the aircraft, "Prepare the cabin for landing." In the first-class cabin, Jasmine watched the ground approaching through her window. The artificial calm maintained by the flight attendants did little to disguise the tension permeating the aircraft. Passengers clutched armrests and murmured prayers as the plane descended. "You did the right thing," Dr. Hayes reassured her, "regardless of what happens next." Jasmine nodded. Though uncertainty gnawed at her, Captain Wilson had implemented her solution, but his reluctance and dismissiveness had been obvious. Would he acknowledge her contribution once they were safely on the ground? Or would this become another example of her achievements being minimized because of who she was? The landing gear deployed with a heavy thunk, and the aircraft's nose tilted further downward. Jasmine closed her eyes as the runway rushed up to meet them. The touchdown was firmer than normal but controlled, the reverse thrusters roaring as Wilson brought the damaged aircraft to a halt. Applause erupted throughout the cabin, passengers releasing their fear and tension in a collective expression of relief. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Washington Dulles International Airport," came the senior flight attendant's voice over the intercom. "Please remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop at the gate and the captain has turned off the fasten seatbelt sign." As the plane taxied toward the terminal, flanked by airport emergency vehicles, Jasmine noticed activity at the end of the jetway. News vans with satellite dishes and reporters with cameras had already gathered, alerted to the emergency situation. "They're quick," Dr. Hayes observed, following Jasmine's gaze. "Commercial aircraft emergencies always attract media attention." When the aircraft finally reached the gate and the engines powered down, Captain Wilson emerged from the cockpit. His silver hair was slightly disheveled, the only visible indication of the stress he'd been under. He stood at the front of the first-class cabin, addressing the passengers with practiced authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your cooperation during our technical difficulty. The situation has been resolved, and you're free to disembark. If you have connecting flights, airline representatives will assist you at the gate." Not a word about the true nature of the emergency or how close they had come to a potential disaster. Certainly no mention of Jasmine's intervention. As passengers began gathering their belongings, Wilson turned toward the cockpit, deliberately avoiding eye contact with Jasmine. The co-pilot, however, paused beside her seat. "That was impressive knowledge for someone your age," he said quietly. "You have a future in aviation if you want it." Before Jasmine could respond, Wilson barked from the cockpit doorway, "Johnson, we have post-incident protocols to complete." The co-pilot gave Jasmine an apologetic smile before rejoining his captain. As passengers filtered toward the exit, Melissa Chen approached Jasmine's seat. "The crew knows what you did," she whispered, "even if the captain won't admit it." Dr. Hayes stood, gathering her briefcase. "This isn't right," she said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "That girl just saved this flight with her knowledge, and the captain is pretending nothing happened." Several passengers turned, looking at Jasmine with newfound interest. "What do you mean?" asked a businessman from across the aisle. I thought. The pilots handled the emergency. The pilots were following standard procedures that weren't working, Dr. Hayes replied. This young woman provided the solution that stabilized the engine. Murmurs spread through the cabin as passengers processed this information. Wilson, overhearing from the cockpit doorway, strode back into the cabin, his face flushed. That's an exaggeration, he said firmly. We had the situation under control. The young lady merely suggested an alternative approach that we were already considering. That's not true, Captain Wilson, Melissa Chen interjected, surprising everyone with her willingness to contradict her superior. I was in the cockpit. You were out of options until she proposed the bypass procedure. Wilson's face darkened. Flight Attendant Chen, you're overstepping your authority. This discussion can continue through official channels if necessary. I believe I'm an appropriate official channel, Dr. Hayes said, stepping forward and presenting her business card to Wilson. Dr. Eleanor Hayes, Chief Innovation Officer at Aerotech Industries. And I'm very interested in what happened on this flight. Wilson took the card, his expression shifting as he recognized the name of one of the largest aerospace manufacturing companies in the world. Dr. Hayes, he acknowledged, his tone suddenly more respectful. I wasn't aware we had such a distinguished passenger aboard. Clearly there were several things you weren't aware of today, Captain, Dr. Hayes replied coolly, including the brilliance of this young woman you so dismissively laughed at during boarding. Wilson's jaw tightened. With all due respect, Dr. Hayes, aircraft operations are complex matters best left to trained professionals. While Ms. Taylor's suggestion happened to align with our emergency procedures, it would be irresponsible to characterize her as having saved the flight. Is that so? Dr. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Perhaps we should review the cockpit voice recordings and flight data. I'm sure your airline's safety department and the FAA would be interested in analyzing exactly what procedures were implemented and who suggested them. The threat was thinly veiled, and Wilson knew it. His professional reputation and possibly his career hung in the balance. There's no need for formal investigations, he said, backpedaling slightly. The situation was resolved successfully, which is what matters. What matters, Dr. Hayes pressed, is giving credit where it's due and acknowledging when our biases cloud our judgment. Ms. Taylor's solution worked because it was based on sound engineering principles she understands at a level that clearly surprised you. By now, several passengers had paused their exit to witness the confrontation. Phones were recording, capturing the tension between the distinguished pilot and the powerful executive. Defending a teenage girl, Wilson glanced around, aware of his audience and the potential ramifications of the scene unfolding. His expression shifted from defiance to calculation to reluctant acceptance. Perhaps, he conceded stiffly, I was hasty in dismissing Ms. Taylor's expertise. Her suggestion was helpful in resolving the situation. That's still not acknowledging what really happened, the co-pilot said, stepping forward despite the risk to his own career. Captain, she identified the exact problem when our diagnostics were inconclusive, and she provided a solution that wasn't in any of our manuals. Without her intervention, we would likely have lost the engine entirely. Wilson's professional facade cracked slightly, revealing the wounded pride beneath. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. Ms. Taylor's technical knowledge was instrumental in addressing the engine malfunction. The airline will certainly recognize her contribution in the incident report. It wasn't a full admission or apology, but it was more than Jasmine had expected. She nodded acknowledgement, maintaining her dignity in the face of Wilson's grudging recognition. As the confrontation concluded, passengers resumed disembarking, many now stopping to congratulate Jasmine or express their gratitude. The businessman who had questioned Dr. Hayes earlier shook Jasmine's hand vigorously. My company develops aviation software, he said, handing her his card. When you're ready for internships, call me directly. Outside the aircraft, the situation escalated further. News crews, initially there to cover a routine emergency landing, caught wind of the unusual story developing. A teenage girl from South Chicago, a gold ticket competition winner, using her engineering knowledge to assist during an in-flight emergency. It was too compelling to ignore. "Miss Taylor, can we get a statement?" called a reporter as Jasmine emerged into the terminal, flanked by Dr. Hayes. Before Jasmine could respond, airline representatives appeared, attempting to control the narrative. "The airline will be issuing an official statement regarding today's incident," announced a harried public relations officer. "We ask for patience as we complete our internal review." "Dr. Hayes, can you confirm reports that a student provided crucial assistance during the emergency?" another reporter called out. Dr. Hayes paused, glancing at Jasmine for permission. When the girl nodded, Dr. Hayes addressed the growing media presence. "What I witnessed today was extraordinary." A 15-year-old engineering prodigy named Jasmine Taylor identified a complex technical issue and provided a solution that helped bring this aircraft safely to the ground. More remarkable still is that she did this after being subjected to dismissive and discriminatory treatment by senior flight personnel who judged her based on her age and appearance rather than her evident expertise. Cameras flashed and microphones thrust forward as reporters sensed a story much bigger than a simple emergency landing. Captain Wilson, emerging from the jetway to find this media circus, attempted to retreat but was quickly spotted. "Captain Wilson, did a teenage girl help save your aircraft today?" shouted a reporter. Wilson froze, caught between professional protocol that dictated no comments to the media and the reality unfolding before him. The airline PR representative rushed to his side, whispering urgently in his ear. Meanwhile, Jasmine stood in the center of the storm, overwhelmed by the sudden attention, but strengthened by Dr. Hayes' supportive presence beside her. This was a turning point, she realized, not just in her journey to NASA, but in her understanding of her own worth and the systems she would need to navigate to achieve her dreams. "All I did was apply the principles I've been studying," she told a reporter who had managed to reach her. "Anyone with the same knowledge would have done the same, but that's just it." Dr. Hayes interjected, "Very few people have that knowledge, especially at your age. What you did today deserves recognition, not minimization." As airline security began creating a pathway through the media for Jasmine and other passengers to proceed to the terminal, Captain Wilson found himself isolated, watching as the narrative slipped entirely from his control. The girl he had humiliated was now the center of attention, her composure and modesty in stark contrast to his earlier condescension. In that moment, as cameras captured his expression for posterity, Captain Richard Wilson realized he had severely underestimated Jasmine Taylor, and that his error in judgment might have consequences far beyond this single flight. The sleek hotel room overlooking the Washington Monument should have felt like a triumph. Instead, Jasmine sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, her gold ticket clutched in her hand, tears silently tracking down her cheeks. The evening news played on the television, the volume low but still audible. In a remarkable turn of events at Dulles International Airport today, the anchor was saying, what began as a routine emergency landing became a story of heroism and controversy. Eyewitnesses report that a teenage competition winner provided crucial technical assistance during an in-flight emergency. The screen switched to footage of Captain Wilson being escorted through the terminal by airline representatives, his face set in a grim expression as reporters shouted questions. The chyron beneath him read, "Heroic captain safely lands troubled aircraft." Jasmine clicked off the television, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Of course, Wilson was still being portrayed as the hero, his decades of experience and quick thinking credited with saving the day. The brief mention of a teenage competition winner had been vague and dismissive, her contribution reduced to a human interest. Footnote: have you ever watched someone else take credit for your work or ideas? Comment number 1 if you've experienced this frustrating situation. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear how Jasmine handles this injustice. I wonder, what would you do if you were in Jasmine's position? Speak up or stay quiet. Would you let the truth remain hidden or fight for recognition? She reached for her phone, needing to hear her mother's voice. Vanessa Taylor answered on the second ring, her voice thick with worry. "Jasmine, baby, are you okay?" I saw something on the news about your flight having an emergency." "I'm fine, Mom," Jasmine assured her, trying to keep her voice steady. "The plane had some engine trouble, but we landed safely. Thank God," Vanessa breathed. "I've been trying to call you for hours. Sorry, it was crazy after we landed. There were reporters and it was a lot." Jasmine hesitated, unsure how much to share about what had happened. "Tell me everything," Vanessa demanded, "and don't leave anything out." So Jasmine did. She told her mother about Captain Wilson's mockery at boarding, about the isolation she felt in first class, about Dr. Hayes' kindness, and finally about identifying the engine problem and providing the solution that Wilson had reluctantly implemented. "He's on TV right now being called a hero," Jasmine concluded, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. "Well, I'm just nothing." "Jasmine Taylor," Vanessa said firmly, "you listen to me right now. You are not nothing. You are everything. You're my brilliant, beautiful daughter who just saved a plane full of people with that amazing brain of yours. Who cares what some news report says?" "I care," Jasmine admitted. "I'm tired of being invisible, Mom. I'm tired of people like Captain Wilson deciding I don't belong before they even know what I can do." There was a pause on the line. "So what are you going to do about it?" The question caught Jasmine off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Vanessa continued, "are you going to let this experience defeat you? Are you going to give up on your NASA presentation tomorrow? Or are you going to show them exactly who Jasmine Taylor is?" Jasmine wiped her tears, her mother's words, igniting a familiar determination within her. "I want to show them," she said. "But what if the same thing happens tomorrow? What if the NASA engineers dismiss me just like Wilson did? Then you'll stand your ground, just like you did on that plane," Vanessa replied. "You didn't let Wilson intimidate you when it mattered most. Don't let him win now by giving up." A knock at the hotel door interrupted their conversation. "Someone's here, Mom. I need to go. Call me after your presentation tomorrow," Vanessa said. "I love you, and I'm so proud of you, more than you can possibly understand." "I love you too, Mom." Jasmine ended the call and approached the door cautiously, looking through the peephole. She was surprised to see Dr. Hayes standing in the hallway, accompanied by a tall black man in a NASA polo shirt. "Dr. Hayes," Jasmine said as she opened the door. "Sorry to disturb you, Jasmine." Dr. Hayes replied, "This is Trevor Washington from NASA. He's been assigned as your guide for tomorrow's presentation." Trevor extended his hand with a warm smile. "It's an honor to meet you, Ms. Taylor. I've heard quite a lot about your adventure today." Jasmine shook his hand, confused by the unexpected visit. "How did you know where I was staying?" "The Future Aviation Leaders Program Coordinator contacted me after hearing about the flight incident," Trevor explained. "I wanted to check on you personally and make sure you're still comfortable proceeding with tomorrow's activities." I'm not sure," Jasmine admitted, "after everything that happened today." "That's partly why we're here," Dr. Hayes interjected. "May we come in?" Jasmine stepped aside, allowing them to enter the spacious hotel suite. The three sat in the small seating area near the window, the lights of Washington, D.C. twinkling below them. "The airline is in full damage control mode," Dr. Hayes said without preamble. Their initial press release credited Wilson entirely, but social media is telling a different story. She handed Jasmine her tablet, open to Twitter. The hashtag Jasmine Saved the Flight was trending, with passengers from the flight sharing their accounts of what had happened. Melissa Chen gave an interview to the Washington Post an hour ago. Trevor added, "She went on record detailing exactly what happened in that cockpit. It's going to run in tomorrow's paper and online tonight." Jasmine scrolled through the tweets, seeing her name repeated over and over, often accompanied by terms like brilliant, hero, and future of aviation. There were also disturbing comments about quota kids and publicity stunts, but they were being rapidly overwhelmed by supportive voices. "The truth is coming out," Dr. Hayes said gently, "but that's not why I'm really here. I'm here because I don't want today's events to distract you from the incredible opportunity you have tomorrow." Trevor nodded in agreement. "Your fuel efficiency design is genuinely innovative. Jasmine, the engineers are excited to hear your presentation." "Really?" Jasmine looked up from the tablet, surprised. "You've seen my design?" "I was on the selection committee," Trevor confirmed. "Your application stood out not just because of the technical merit, which was exceptional, but because of the resourcefulness it demonstrated. You developed this with limited resources, using creativity to overcome barriers that would have stopped many others. That's what real innovation looks like," Dr. Hayes added. "Not fancy labs and unlimited budgets, but creative minds finding solutions others can't see." Jasmine felt a warmth spreading through her chest, pushing back against the cold disappointment of the news coverage. "I was thinking about not going tomorrow," she admitted. "I was afraid it would be like today all over again." "That's understandable," Trevor said. "But I can promise you this, at NASA, we care about ideas and innovation. Yes, there are still biases in our industry. I won't pretend otherwise. But your work deserves to be heard." Dr. Hayes leaned forward. "And honestly, after today's events, you'll probably have the most attentive audience of any presenter. Everyone wants to meet the teenager who saved a commercial airliner." For the first time since landing, Jasmine smiled. "My mom just told me not to let Captain Wilson win by giving up." "Smart woman, your mother," Dr. Hayes replied. "I'd like to meet her someday. She works 3 jobs," Jasmine said quietly. "She couldn't afford to come with me." Trevor and Dr. Hayes exchanged a look. "Well," Trevor said, "perhaps we can fix that for future events. But for now, are you feeling ready for tomorrow?" Jasmine thought about her presentation, about the months of work she'd poured into her design, about all the nights she'd stayed up late studying concepts most adults couldn't grasp. She thought about Captain Wilson's dismissive laughter and how it had nearly broken her spirit. Then she thought about the moment in the cockpit, when her knowledge had made the difference between potential disaster and a safe landing. "Yes," she said firmly, "I'm ready." After Trevor and Dr. Hayes left, promising to meet her in the hotel lobby the next morning, Jasmine felt a renewed sense of purpose. She opened her laptop and reviewed her presentation one more time, making small adjustments and practicing her delivery aloud. As she worked, her phone buzzed with a news alert. She tapped the notification to find a breaking news update. "Airline acknowledges teenage passenger assisted during emergency. Captain Richard Wilson, an unnamed teen to receive commendations." It wasn't complete justice, but it was a start. Jasmine set down her phone and returned to her presentation. Tomorrow wasn't about Captain Wilson or today's drama. Tomorrow was about her future, about showing the aerospace world exactly what she was capable of. And no one, not Captain Wilson, not the media, not anyone, was going to take that opportunity away from her. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of NASA's Goddard Visitor Center auditorium, illuminating the polished stage where 6 podiums stood in a row. Behind them, a massive screen displayed the future aviation leaders of America logo, a stylized aircraft soaring through stars. The audience seats were filling rapidly with aerospace engineers, industry executives, and education officials, all gathered to hear presentations from the nation's most promising young aviation minds. Jasmine stood in the wings, clutching her presentation notes, her heart hammering against her ribs. She wore the blazer and skirt her neighbor had given her, freshly pressed by the hotel's overnight service. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and the gold competition ticket hung from a lanyard around her neck, a visible symbol of her right to be there. Nervous? Trevor Washington appeared beside her, offering a bottle of water. Terrified, Jasmine admitted, accepting the water gratefully. "That's normal," Trevor assured her. "I still get nervous before presentations, and I've been doing this for 15 years. It's not just presentation jitters," Jasmine confessed. "After yesterday, I keep expecting someone else to question why I'm here." Trevor's expression softened with understanding. "Look out there," he said, gesturing toward the filling auditorium. "See the woman in the front row? That's Dr. Catalina Rodriguez, head of propulsion research. Next to her is Terrence Mitchell, chief engineer for the Next Generation Spacecraft Program. They're here because they read your paper and were impressed, not because of your age, your race, or yesterday's events, because of your mind." Jasmine peered out at the distinguished audience members Trevor had indicated. Really," he confirmed. "In fact, Your fuel efficiency concept has already generated significant discussion among our research teams. They're especially interested in how it might be adapted for spacecraft propulsion systems. Before Jasmine could respond, a commotion near the auditorium entrance caught her attention. Captain Richard Wilson had arrived, accompanied by his son, a tall, confident young man who bore a striking resemblance to his father. Both wore crisp suits that screamed privilege and entitlement. "What is he doing here?" Jasmine whispered, her newly built confidence wavering. Trevor followed her gaze. "That's Bradley Wilson, another competition finalist. His project focuses on cockpit ergonomics. Captain Wilson's son is a finalist too." Jasmine felt a cold, not forming in her stomach. "Yes, though between us," Trevor lowered his voice, "his project wasn't nearly as innovative as yours. The selection committee had some heated discussions about his inclusion." The implication was clear, and it only increased Jasmine's determination. This wasn't just about proving herself anymore. It was about demonstrating that true merit should transcend connections and privilege. The program coordinator approached, clipboard in hand. 10 minutes until we begin, prisoners. You'll be introduced in alphabetical order by last name, each, with 15 minutes for your presentation and 5 for questions." Jasmine quickly calculated Taylor would put her near the end, giving her time to observe the other prisoners and gauge the audience's reactions. As the coordinator walked away, Jasmine noticed Bradley Wilson watching her from across the stage area. After a moment of hesitation, he approached, his father following closely behind. "You're Jasmine Taylor, right?" Bradley asked, extending his hand. "The girl from yesterday's flight." Jasmine nodded, shaking his hand briefly. "That's right. I heard what happened," Bradley continued, his tone difficult to read. "Pretty impressive." "Thank you," Jasmine replied cautiously, unsure of his intentions. Captain Wilson stood stiffly beside his son, clearly uncomfortable. "Miss Taylor." He acknowledged with a curt nod. "Captain Wilson," she returned evenly. An awkward silence stretched between them until Bradley broke it. "Well, good luck today. May the best design win, right?" "Right," Jasmine agreed. "Good luck to you too." As they walked away, Trevor leaned closer. "Remember what you're here for," he murmured. "Your work speaks for itself." The house lights dimmed, signaling the start of the program. The audience settled into their seats as the competition director took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Future Aviation Leaders of America final presentation event. Today, you'll hear from 6 extraordinary young minds who represent the next generation of aerospace innovation. One by one, the finalists were called to present. A confident boy from a prestigious New England prep school described advancements in winglet design. A pair of twin sisters from California demonstrated a new approach to reducing cabin noise. Bradley Wilson delivered a polished, if somewhat derivative presentation on cockpit control layouts that received polite applause. Throughout it all, Jasmine observed the audience reactions, noting which concepts generated genuine interest and which merely earned courtesy. She also couldn't help noticing the difference in presentation styles the other finalists all had. Professional-grade slides, clearly prepared with expensive software and possibly professional assistance. Her own presentation, while technically sound, had been created on the school's outdated computers with basic software. Next, we have Jasmine Taylor from South Chicago. The announcer finally called. Her project explores innovative approaches to fuel efficiency through pressure gradient optimization. As Jasmine took the stage, she was acutely aware of every eye in the room upon her. The events of the previous day had clearly preceded her. Whispers rippled through the audience. As she approached the podium, in the front row, Dr. Hayes gave her an encouraging nod. "Good morning," Jasmine began, her voice initially trembling before finding its strength. "Before I start, I want to acknowledge that my presentation doesn't have the glossy graphics or professional polish of some others you've seen today. What it does have is a solution to a problem that costs the aviation industry billions of dollars annually and contributes significantly to environmental damage." With that bold opening, she launched into her technical presentation. As she spoke, her initial nervousness fell away, replaced by the confident expertise that came from truly understanding her subject. She explained her discovery of the inefficiencies in current fuel delivery systems, the mathematical models she'd developed to optimize pressure gradients, and the practical applications of her theoretical work, using materials salvaged from discarded electronics and equipment borrowed from my school lab. I built this working prototype. She continued, displaying photos of her handmade device. The results exceeded even my projections, showing a 23% increase in efficiency under simulated conditions. Throughout her presentation, Jasmine noticed the audience's attention intensifying rather than waning. Engineers who had been politely attentive for previous presentations were now leaning forward, taking notes. Dr. Rodriguez was nodding thoughtfully, whispering to colleagues, but perhaps the most compelling evidence for the system's effectiveness came unexpectedly. Jasmine continued, her voice steady despite the personal nature of what she was about to share. Yesterday, aboard Flight 1457, the same principle helped stabilize an aircraft experiencing fuel system cavitation, a demonstration of real-world application that none of us anticipated. A murmur ran through the audience. From his seat, in the third row, Captain Wilson shifted uncomfortably. In conclusion, Jasmine said, "This isn't just theoretical work. It's a practical solution ready for further development and implementation. It could make air travel more efficient, more economical, and more environmentally sustainable. And it was developed not in a state-of-the-art lab, but in a South Chicago public school by a student who believes that innovation can come from anywhere, if we're willing to look beyond our preconceptions about who can contribute and who belongs." In spaces like this, she finished exactly on time, her final words hanging in the air for a moment before the auditorium erupted in applause. Not the polite, measured response the other prisoners had received, but enthusiastic, genuine appreciation. In the front row, Dr. Rodriguez was already on her feet, leading what quickly became a standing ovation. The question period that followed was equally validating. Rather than the basic inquiries other prisoners had fielded, Jasmine was challenged with complex technical questions that demonstrated how seriously the experts were taking her work. "Have you considered how this might scale to larger commercial aircraft?" asked a Boeing engineer. "What testing would you prioritize to move this from prototype to implementation?" inquired a regulatory specialist. Jasmine answered each question thoughtfully, acknowledging the limits of her research while demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of the challenges involved in bringing innovation to the conservative aviation industry. As she returned to her seat, Trevor gave her a subtle thumbs up. The final presenter took the stage, but Jasmine noticed many audience members still jotting notes about her presentation, rather than focusing on the new speaker. When all presentations concluded, the competition director announced a 30-minute reception in the adjacent hall, where attendees could speak with the prisoners individually. As the audience rose from their seats, Jasmine found herself immediately surrounded by engineers and executives eager to continue the conversation. "Miss Taylor, I'd like to discuss potential applications for military aircraft," said an Air Force colonel. "Would you be interested in an internship opportunity next summer?" asked a representative from Lockheed Martin. "Your mathematical modeling is particularly impressive," noted a professor from MIT. "Have you considered your college plans yet?" Across the reception hall, Jasmine caught glimpses of Bradley Wilson standing alone, his father engaged in heated conversation with the competition director. Whatever dreams Captain Wilson had harbored of his son being the star of this event had clearly been dashed. Dr. Hayes appeared at Jasmine's side, skillfully helping her navigate the overwhelming attention. "Let me introduce you to Lawrence Peterson," she said, guiding Jasmine toward a distinguished man in his 60s. "Lawrence is the CEO of Aerotech Industries and someone I think you should meet." Peterson greeted Jasmine with genuine respect. "Dr. Hayes has told me about your remarkable work and your equally remarkable actions yesterday. I'd like to hear more about both." For the next 15 minutes, Jasmine engaged in the kind of high-level technical discussion she had always dreamed of, with one of the industry's most respected leaders treating her as an intellectual peer rather than a curiosity or a token. As their conversation concluded, Peterson handed Jasmine his business card. "We should talk about your future, Miss Taylor. Aerotech has a scholarship program for exceptional talents, and I believe you would be an outstanding candidate." Jasmine accepted the card with slightly trembling hands, the reality of what was happening finally sinking in. This wasn't just about a competition anymore. This was about doors opening to a future she had barely dared to imagine. As the reception continued around her, Jasmine found a quiet moment to send a quick text to her mother. "Mom, you won't believe what's happening. Call you tonight with details. Love you." The response came almost immediately. "I believe it, baby. I've always believed in you." With renewed confidence, Jasmine returned to the networking reception, ready to embrace the opportunities that her mind, not her age, not her background, not her race, had earned her. 3 days after the NASA presentation, Jasmine sat in the elegant conference room on the 38th floor of Aerotech Industries' Washington, D.C. headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the capital city, a visual reminder of how far she had come from her South Chicago apartment. Across the polished mahogany table sat Lawrence Peterson, CEO of Aerotech, flanked by Dr. Eleanor Hayes and 2 other executives. They had been discussing Jasmine's fuel efficiency design for nearly an hour, delving into technical details and potential applications with a seriousness that validated everything she had worked for. "The patent potential alone is significant," noted Rajiv Patel, Aerotech's legal counsel. "Preliminary searches suggest your approach is novel enough to be fully protectable." "Which brings us to our proposal," Peterson said, sliding a folder across the table. "We'd like to develop your technology, with you as the named inventor and primary consultant." Jasmine opened the folder with steady hands, her nervousness from earlier meetings replaced by growing confidence. Inside was a detailed offer, a substantial licensing agreement, a full college scholarship to the engineering school of her choice, and a guaranteed internship position at Aerotech each summer. "This is incredible," she said, scanning the documents. "But I need to discuss this with my mother before making any decisions." "Of course." Peterson nodded approvingly. "We'd expect nothing less. In fact, we've arranged for your mother to fly out tomorrow morning to join these discussions. First class, naturally." Jasmine's eyes widened. "You're flying my mom here." "It was Dr. Hayes' suggestion," Peterson replied, smiling at his chief innovation officer. "Talent like yours deserves proper support, and that includes family involvement in these decisions." Before Jasmine could express her gratitude, Peterson's assistant entered the room. "Sir, there's a situation you should be aware of. It's on every news channel." Peterson frowned, pressing a button on a remote that lowered a screen from the ceiling. The television came to life, showing a CNN breaking news banner. "Exclusive, flight attendant reveals truth about emergency landing." The screen showed Melissa Chen being interviewed, her Air National uniform replaced by professional civilian attire. The captain's official report minimized the situation and completely erased the crucial role Jasmine Taylor played in saving that aircraft. She was saying, "I felt compelled to come forward with the truth." The report cut to footage of the emergency landing, then to passenger interviews corroborating Melissa's account. A graphic appeared showing the timeline of events, prominently featuring Jasmine's intervention at the critical moment. "Air National has issued this statement," the reporter continued, reading from a document. "We are conducting a thorough investigation into the incidents aboard Flight 1457 and take these allegations seriously. Captain Wilson has been placed on administrative leave, pending review." Jasmine watched in stunned silence as her name and image filled national news screens. The report included clips from her NASA presentation, expert commentary on her fuel efficiency design, and background on the Future Aviation Leaders competition. "Well," Peterson said as he muted the broadcast, "it appears the truth has a way of emerging, despite attempts to suppress it." "Melissa risked her job," Jasmine said quietly, still processing what she had seen, "and did the right thing," Dr. Hayes added. "Sometimes justice requires courage." Peterson's phone buzzed. After checking the message, he looked up with a slight smile. "Speaking of justice, I've just been informed that Captain Wilson is downstairs, requesting a meeting. Jasmine's stomach tightened. Captain Wilson is here. Why? Aerotech is Air National's largest shareholder, Peterson explained. And after yesterday's board call, I'm now heading the airline's ethics committee review of the incident. Wilson was instructed to report here this afternoon. He studied Jasmine's expression. You don't have to be present for this meeting if you're uncomfortable. Jasmine considered for a moment, then straightened her shoulders. No, I want to be there. I think I need to be. Very well. Peterson nodded with approval. Rajiv, please escort Captain Wilson up. 20 minutes later, Captain Richard Wilson entered the conference room, his usual commanding presence diminished by recent events. He wore his uniform, but lacked the confident bearing that had once seemed inseparable from it. Seeing Jasmine seated at the table clearly surprised him. Captain Wilson. Peterson greeted him formally. Thank you for coming. I believe you know Dr. Hayes and Ms. Taylor. Wilson nodded stiffly. Yes, sir. Please, sit down. Peterson gestured to an empty chair, notably at the far end of the table. Not among the executives. We're here to discuss the events of Flight 1457 and subsequent discrepancies. In reporting, Wilson sat, his expression guarded. Sir, with respect, I followed all company protocols for emergency situations and incident reporting. Did those protocols include publicly humiliating a passenger based on her race and age? Dr. Hayes asked pointedly, or taking credit for her solution while erasing her contribution from official reports? Wilson's jaw tightened. The official report acknowledged that a passenger provided a suggestion that aligned with established procedures. That's not how Flight Attendant Chen describes it, Peterson interjected, sliding a transcript across the table. Nor does it match the cockpit voice recorder transcript, which I've reviewed personally. Wilson glanced at the documents, but didn't touch them. In high-pressure situations, recollections can vary. My primary responsibility was the safety of all passengers, including Ms. Taylor, Peterson asked. Or did your responsibility to her diminish because of preconceived notions about who she was and what she was capable of? The direct confrontation seemed to catch Wilson off guard. He looked toward Jasmine, then back to Peterson. I made a judgment call based on 30 years of experience, he said defensively. In my position, you learn to make quick assessments, and those assessments led you to publicly mock a 15-year-old girl holding a gold competition ticket. Dr. Hayes said, her voice cool, to laugh at her presence in first class, to suggest she didn't earn her place. Wilson shifted uncomfortably. If my actions were perceived as insensitive, I apologize. That wasn't my intent. Intent versus impact, Captain Wilson, Peterson said, a concept I believe Air National's diversity training covers extensively. Training you've completed 6 times according to your personnel file. The mention of his personnel file clearly unnerved Wilson. Mr. Peterson, I've served Air National with distinction for 3 decades. My safety record is impeccable, and we value that service, Peterson acknowledged. But we cannot ignore what happened here. The videos from the terminal, the passenger statements, the crew testimonials. They paint a disturbing picture not just of a momentary lapse in judgment, but of a pattern of behavior. Wilson's professional facade began to crack. What exactly are you suggesting, sir? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. Peterson leaned forward. Fact, you publicly humiliated a passenger based on apparent biases. Fact, when that same passenger provided a solution that likely prevented a catastrophic engine failure, you initially dismissed her input. Fact, in your official report, you minimize her contribution to nearly nothing. Fact, you allowed yourself to be portrayed as the sole hero in media coverage, even knowing that wasn't accurate. Each point landed like a physical blow. Wilson's complexion paled, then flushed. What do you want from me? He finally asked. Accountability, Peterson replied simply. The truth, and a commitment to do better. After a long moment, Wilson's shoulders sagged slightly. The truth, he repeated. The truth is that I didn't believe someone her age could possibly understand aircraft systems better than I do. I've spent my entire adult life flying commercial jets, My father was a pilot. His father was a pilot. I didn't think, I couldn't accept, that someone who doesn't look like you, or come from your background, could have knowledge you don't. Dr. Hayes finished for him. Wilson didn't answer immediately. His gaze shifted to Jasmine. Your solution wasn't in any manual or procedure I've ever studied. When it worked, I couldn't reconcile that with my preconceptions. So I found ways to explain it that preserved my understanding of the world. He paused. That was wrong. It wasn't a full apology, but it was perhaps the most honest statement he'd made since entering the room. Captain Wilson. Jasmine spoke for the first time since he'd arrived. I didn't ask to be on your plane that day. I didn't want to come to the cockpit during an emergency. All I wanted was to be treated with basic respect and dignity. When I was denied that, I still chose to help because lives were at stake, including yours. Wilson held her gaze, something shifting in his expression. You're right. And for what it's worth now, thank you. Your knowledge saved that aircraft when standard procedures were failing. That's not easy for me to admit, but it's the truth. Peterson nodded, satisfied with this progress. Air National's board has made several decisions regarding this matter. First, you will issue a public statement acknowledging Ms. Taylor's role in resolving the emergency with a personal apology for your conduct. Second, you will undergo additional sensitivity and bias training before returning to active flight status. Third, you will participate in the airline's mentorship program for underrepresented youth interested in aviation careers. Wilson absorbed these requirements, recognizing the alternative that remained unspoken: termination. I understand, he said finally. There's one more thing, Peterson added. Aerotech is establishing a new scholarship program for minority students pursuing aerospace engineering. We've decided to name it after Ms. Taylor. We'd like you to serve on the selection committee to ensure that no future Jasmines are dismissed before they can demonstrate their capabilities. This final requirement clearly surprised Wilson. You want me involved in that? Who better? Dr. Hayes interjected. You've experienced firsthand the cost of underestimating someone based on appearance. That perspective could be valuable if you're willing to learn from it. Wilson looked at Jasmine again, seeing her clearly perhaps for the first time. I would be honored to participate. As the meeting concluded and Wilson was escorted out to complete paperwork, Jasmine remained in the conference room with Peterson and Dr. Hayes. Was that justice? She asked quietly. Dr. Hayes considered the question. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about creating change, both in individuals and in systems. And sometimes, Peterson added, it's about turning an unfortunate incident into an opportunity for something better. He gestured to the folder containing Aerotech's offer. Like this scholarship program that will help other young people like yourself. Jasmine nodded, thinking about all the events that had brought her to this moment. From winning the competition in her underfunded school to facing discrimination on the flight, to saving the aircraft too shining at NASA, each challenge had led to this unexpected opportunity. As she looked out over the Washington skyline, Jasmine realized that the justice she had received wasn't just about Wilson's accountability. It was about her voice being heard, her contributions being recognized, and doors opening that would allow her to create the future she had always dreamed of. My mother arrives tomorrow, she confirmed. First class. Peterson smiled. And this time, I can promise there won't be anyone questioning whether she belongs there. 5 years had transformed Jasmine Taylor from a promising teenager into a formidable young woman of 20. The gold ticket that had once been her most prized possession now hung framed on her dormitory wall at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where she was completing her final year of undergraduate studies in aeronautical engineering. Beside it hung another testament to her journey, a framed patent certificate for her fuel efficiency system, which was now being implemented by major airlines worldwide. The Boston winter sun streamed through her window as Jasmine adjusted, her blazer no longer borrowed but custom-tailored, a gift from Dr. Eleanor Hayes when Jasmine had been named to Forbes 30 Under 30 list in science and technology the previous year. On her desk sat an invitation to the National Aviation Conference in Washington, D.C., where she would be delivering the keynote address. Ready for this? Asked her roommate Alicia. leaning against the doorframe. As ready as I'll ever be, Jasmine replied, tucking her presentation notes into her sleek briefcase. Another upgrade from the borrowed laptop bag of her competition days. The car's downstairs, Alicia reminded her, and your mom texted. Her flight landed on time. Jasmine smiled at the mention of her mother. Vanessa Taylor had finally been able to quit her multiple jobs after Jasmine's patent royalties, and scholarship funds had stabilized their finances. She now worked just one job as community outreach coordinator for the Jasmine Taylor Foundation, which helped minority students pursue careers in aviation and aerospace. I'll see you at the conference tomorrow, Jasmine confirmed. Wouldn't miss it, Alicia promised. The whole engineering department is coming to watch our star graduate make history. Downstairs, a sleek company car waited to take Jasmine to the private airfield where an Aerotech corporate jet stood ready as Chief Innovation Intern, a position created specifically for her. Jasmine had access to company resources that still occasionally felt surreal to a girl from South Chicago. During the short flight to Washington, Jasmine reviewed her keynote address, which would outline her vision for the future of sustainable aviation. The industry had changed significantly in the 5 years since her first flight, partly due to technologies like hers and partly due to evolving attitudes about who belonged in aerospace engineering. The Taylor Scholarship Program, now in its 4th year, had already helped dozens of underrepresented students enter the field. Jasmine took particular pride in mentoring these scholars, remembering how Dr. Hayes' support had changed her own trajectory. When the corporate jet touched down at Reagan National Airport, Jasmine was surprised to see not just her mother waiting, but also Dr. Hayes and Lawrence Peterson. We thought we'd welcome you personally, Peterson explained as they walked toward the waiting limousine. Today's a big day, after all. The keynote isn't until tomorrow, Jasmine reminded him, curious about their mysterious smiles. The keynote is only part of why we're here, Dr. Hayes said enigmatically. There's another matter we need to discuss before the conference begins. In the limousine, Peterson handed Jasmine a folder emblazoned with the Aerotech logo. The board meeting was yesterday, he said. We waited to tell you in person. Jasmine opened the folder to find an official letter, offering her the position of Executive Director of Sustainable Aviation Technologies at Aerotech Industries, effective immediately upon her graduation in 3 months. 20 years old, and already an executive, Vanessa said proudly, squeezing her daughter's hand. I always told you you'd change the world. There's more, Peterson added, gesturing for Jasmine to continue reading. The second document in the folder made her breath catch. Aerotech is acquiring Air National Airlines, she read aloud, looking up in disbelief. The deal closes next week, Dr. Hayes confirmed. And guess who will be overseeing the implementation of your fuel efficiency technology across their entire fleet? Jasmine's mind raced as she processed the implications. Air National, that's Captain Wilson's airline. Still is, Peterson nodded. Though he's moved into training and management. Since the incident, he's actually done remarkable work with the mentorship program these past 5 years. The limousine pulled up to the conference center where the National Aviation Conference would begin the following day. As they entered the building for a private tour, Jasmine noticed a familiar, silver-haired figure waiting in the lobby. Captain Richard Wilson had aged in the 5 years since their first encounter. The arrogance that had once defined him had mellowed into something more thoughtful. When he saw Jasmine, he straightened his posture, not out of pride now, but respect. Miss Taylor, he greeted her, extending his hand. Or should I say, Executive Director Taylor, congratulations on your appointment. Jasmine accepted his handshake. Thank you, Captain Wilson. I was hoping we might have a moment to speak privately, Wilson said, glancing toward her entourage. After receiving a reassuring nod from her mother, Jasmine followed Wilson to a quiet corner of the lobby. I wanted to see you before tomorrow's public events, he began. To tell you something important. Jasmine waited, curious about what this man, once her antagonist, now something more complicated, might say. 5 years ago, I was a different person. Wilson continued, set in my ways, blind to my prejudices, defensive about my position in the world. When you stepped onto my aircraft with that gold ticket, you challenged everything I thought I knew about who belongs where." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Working with the scholarship program these past years, mentoring young people who remind me of you, it's changed me. I've had to confront uncomfortable truths about myself and the industry I've served my entire life. I've heard you've done good work with the program." Jasmine acknowledged. Wilson nodded. "It's been the most meaningful phase of my career, honestly. More important than any flight I've ever piloted." He met her gaze directly. "I know a simple apology doesn't erase what happened, but I want you to know that you didn't just change the aviation industry with your innovation. You changed at least one old pilot who thought he knew everything." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Jasmine thought about the frightened 15-year-old she had been, standing frozen at that airplane entrance with tears streaming down her face. As this man's mocking laughter echoed around her, she thought about how that moment of humiliation had nearly derailed her dreams before they could begin. "Thank you for telling me this," she said finally. "It matters. There's one more thing." Wilson added, "My son Bradley, you remember him from the competition?" "Of course. He's graduating from engineering school this year too." "Not met. Like you," Wilson smiled ruefully, "but he's done well, and he's applying for a position at Aerotech. I wanted you to hear it from me, given that you'll be, well, essentially his boss if he's hired." Jasmine couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Life takes unexpected turns, doesn't it? "Indeed it does," Wilson agreed. "I'll be in the audience for your keynote tomorrow. The whole industry is eager to hear your vision for the future." As Wilson walked away, Jasmine rejoined her mother, Dr. Hayes, and Peterson. They continued their tour of the conference facilities, including the grand ballroom, where she would deliver her address the following day. That evening, at a private dinner with industry leaders, Jasmine found herself seated next to the current FAA administrator, discussing policy changes that could accelerate the adoption of sustainable aviation technologies. "Your fuel efficiency system is already making a significant impact," the administrator noted. "Preliminary data shows a 20% reduction in carbon emissions across airlines that have implemented it." "That's just the beginning," Jasmine replied. "The next generation of the technology will push that to 30%. "Remarkable," the administrator said. "And you developed the initial concept as a teenager with limited resources." Jasmine confirmed, "Which is why I believe so strongly in the Foundation's work. Imagine the innovations we're missing because brilliant minds lack access to opportunities." The conversation continued, touching on regulatory frameworks, international standards, and the future of green aviation. Throughout the evening, Jasmine noticed how these industry veterans, predominantly older white men, now listened attentively to her perspectives, a stark contrast to her initial reception 5 years earlier. The next morning, Jasmine stood backstage at the conference, waiting to be introduced for her keynote address. Through a gap in the curtains, she could see the packed auditorium. Over 2,000 aviation professionals from around the world gathered to hear what the 20-year-old wonderkind had to say about the industry's future. In the front row sat her mother, beaming with pride. Beside Vanessa were Dr. Hayes and Lawrence Peterson. A few seats away, Captain Wilson sat with his son Bradley, both attentive and expectant. "And now," the conference chair announced, "it is my distinct honor to introduce our keynote speaker. At just 20 years of age, she has already revolutionized aircraft fuel systems, holds 3 patents, and was recently appointed as the youngest executive director in Aerotech Industries history. Please welcome Jasmine Taylor." As Jasmine stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a South Chicago apartment to this podium, from a mock teenager to a respected industry leader. She thought about the gold ticket that had opened the first door, and all the doors she had pushed through since then, often against resistance. "Thank you," she began, her voice confident and clear. "5 years ago, I stood frozen at an airplane entrance, gold ticket in hand, while the captain laughed at the idea that someone like me could belong in first class." A hush fell over the audience as they recognized a reference to the now famous incident. Today, I stand before you not just as someone who belongs in this industry, but as someone helping to shape its future. My journey from that moment to this podium is not just a personal triumph, but a testament to what becomes possible when we recognize that innovation can come from anywhere, from prestigious labs and underfunded schools alike, from established experts and unknown novices, from those who have always belonged and those who have had to fight to prove they do. As she continued her address, outlining her vision for sustainable aviation and the inclusive future she was helping to build, Jasmine realized that her story had come full circle. The pilot who had laughed at her gold ticket was now in her audience, learning from her. The airline that had been the site of her humiliation would soon be part of the company where she was an executive. The industry that had initially questioned her presence was now eagerly awaiting her guidance. It wasn't just a personal victory, it was a transformation of an industry, of attitudes, of possibilities for countless others who would follow the path she had helped to forge. When she concluded her keynote to a standing ovation, Jasmine knew that the 15-year-old girl with tears streaming down her face hadn't just survived the mockery and discrimination. She had transcended it, transformed it, and used it as fuel for a journey that was still just beginning. As she left the stage to continued applause, Jasmine caught her mother's eye in the front row. Vanessa's expression held everything: pride, love, vindication, and most of all, the certainty that had never wavered. Even in their darkest moments, you're going to change the world someday. And Jasmine Taylor was just getting started. What would you have done in Jasmine's place when faced with discrimination? Would you have found the courage to speak up and use your knowledge despite being dismissed? Like, subscribe, and share this story if you believe in standing up against prejudice and recognizing that brilliance can come from anywhere. Comment below with your thoughts on how we can create more opportunities for underrepresented voices in professional fields. Thank you for joining me for this incredible journey of perseverance and triumph. Remember, your circumstances don't define your potential. Jasmine's story teaches us that true merit transcends prejudice. When faced with discrimination, she didn't allow Captain Wilson's mockery to diminish her worth or potential. Instead, she let her knowledge and abilities speak for themselves, ultimately saving the very people who had dismissed her. The journey reminds us that innovation and brilliance can emerge from unexpected places. Jasmine's background, a South Chicago public school with limited resources, didn't prevent her from developing revolutionary technology. Often, the most creative solutions come from those who must overcome obstacles with ingenuity and determination. The story also highlights how systems change. Captain Wilson's transformation wasn't immediate. It required confronting his biases through continued exposure to evidence that contradicted his worldview. True justice isn't always about punishment, but about creating opportunities for growth and change. Perhaps most importantly, Jasmine's triumph shows the power of perseverance. She continued forward despite humiliation, using each challenge as fuel for her journey rather than a reason to give up. Her success wasn't just personal. It created pathways for others through the scholarship program and mentorship initiatives. When we stand firm in our knowledge and abilities, refuse to be limited by others' perceptions, and persist despite obstacles, we don't just transform our own lives, we help reshape the world for those who will follow. Has someone ever underestimated you because of who you are or where you come from? How did you respond to that situation? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone facing similar challenges today. If Jasmine's journey resonated with you, hit that like button to help more people discover this powerful message about overcoming discrimination and believing in your own potential regardless of others' perceptions. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of resilience, courage, and triumph over adversity. Each week, we share real experiences that demonstrate the incredible strength of the human spirit when faced with injustice. Have you witnessed discrimination in professional settings? What do you think companies and institutions should do to create more inclusive environments where everyone's contributions are valued? Start the conversation in the comments. Thank you for joining us for Jasmine's powerful journey from humiliation to triumph. Remember that your voice matters, your talents are valid, and your presence is necessary in every space you choose to enter together. We can build a world where gold tickets and first-class seats are available to everyone, with the ability to earn them